This is the Get Savvy Show, brought to you by the Reluctant Leader Academy. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and on each episode, I'm going to help you get savvy to allow you and your business to grow. We'll be focusing on the three elements that lead to business success: your mindset, your processes, and your skills. Hello and welcome to this edition of the Get Savvy Show, brought to you by the Reluctant Leader Academy. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and today we are going to be talking about workplace bullying. I'm really delighted to have an expert on that subject because I think it's something that needs to be addressed. And there's lots of stories within my clients that have maybe inadvertently become bullies. And I think that's an important thing to remember, that we can actually become bullies by mistake. So before we get started, just want to let you know that if you want to catch up with previous editions of the Get Savvy Show, then you can find them all at the Reluctant Leader Academy YouTube channel. Right, so without further ado, I shall bring my guest on. Marilise, welcome.
Good morning, Mark. Well, it's so great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to this sort of difficult subject, I suppose, in some ways, but hopefully by the end of the show, then we'll have a bit more idea about actually how we can approach the problem, which obviously comes to most workplaces and differing degrees. But before we get stuck into that, would you like to introduce yourself a bit, what you do, where people can find you, and how you ended up doing what you do now?
With pleasure, thank you. So yes, I'm the CEO and founder of Roar Coaching and Consulting. And really, we are passionate about people living their best lives. And that means lives on purpose, in your power, and with the courage to speak your truth. And it kind of all stemmed from me leaving my 20-year corporate career because of burnout, because I was working in a toxic environment. Unfortunately, my boss bullied me, and I took years to be able to actually say that out loud. And so part of my healing journey has been to acknowledge it and to understand it and to make sense of it. And one of the key things for me was realizing how it is a silent epidemic in our workplaces today. Because at the time I thought this is only happening to me. But then I started having conversations with so many people, and I realized that this is actually happening to a lot of people. And you know, people are not always toxic bullies. People are accidental bullies, and that's probably the majority of the time, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, so my passion, it really sort of ignited a fire in my belly to raise awareness, to shine a spotlight on what I believe is today's silent epidemic.
Great, thanks for a brilliant introduction. So we're looking forward to this topic. Before we do that, most people will know that we look at what drives us. So we're going to have a quick look at Marilise's motivators. So if you've not seen the show before, what we do, all the guests come on and complete a motivational map. And then we have a quick discussion around the top three motivators. These are the top three out of 9. We haven't got time to go into what all the 9 motivators are, but so for Marilise, the top 3 motivators for her is at the top there, the searcher. So it's the drive to do something useful, purposeful, and meaningful. Secondly, the spirit motivator is about having freedom, autonomy to do things in her own way. And thirdly, the creator motivator is the drive to have innovation, bring new ideas in, and solve problems. So my question, Marilise, is how do you see these 3 motivators turning up in the way that you run your business?
And I think it's absolutely spot on. So I do want to genuinely make a difference. My purpose is really to help people move from a sort of a victim mentality to a victor mentality, to really step into that sort of creator role of your life. You know, so everything we do at Roar is all about living your best life. So for me, that searcher piece really resonates because it is really about I love doing this. I love helping people grow and helping people become the best version of themselves and living their best lives. Absolutely, free spirit. Absolutely, love being able to make my own decisions. And as an owner of my own business now, it's definitely what I love doing. And yeah, always looking to learn. I think for me, the creator aspect, and I said to you earlier, stepping into that creator role of your life, I mean, it's been a really big learning and journey for me over the last 4 years, in terms of where I came from as that sort of burnt out corporate exec, and having to really um, take control, reignite my purpose and take control of my life. So this really resonates. It's very, very spot on.
It makes sense, especially what you're doing is that these are very sort of growth orientated.
Yeah,
It's about the future and creating
yeah,
something new. The
yes,
creator's interesting because you've written a book. We're going to talk about that. So that's obviously innovating, bringing new ideas in, and being creative with that
yeah,
process.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, when I saw your results, it absolutely didn't surprise me one bit. And it's sort of a typical drive that drives people that want to make that difference, and particularly the sort of work that you do, and similarly to what I do, is around helping people to grow. And like you summed up earlier, is about your vision to make people help people to live their true lives. Great stuff. Right. So thank you for sharing that with us. So let's get back to the topic, which is about workplace bullying. What I noticed from your book, which is Raw, which you'll see in a second, which you talk about the bully as not just as an outer bully, but there's also this inner bully, which we can. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah. So the subtitle of the book is How to Tame the Bully Inside and Out.
Hmm.
And partly because I had to really hold the mirror up. So after I left my job and I was kind of in pieces, one of the very first steps I took was to get honest with myself. All healing comes from being honest with yourself, holding the mirror up, and not easy to do, but acknowledging the role that I played in the dynamics of that toxic relationship. So how I effectively allowed the bullying, and people get quite anxious when I say I allowed the bullying, but it's a case of I didn't have healthy boundaries. I wanted to please him. I wanted to, bend over backwards to please other people, but I was running on empty. I wasn't kind of putting my own oxygen mask on first. And it stemmed from having this inner bully. Now, I call it an inner bully. You may call it your imposter, your inner critic, your inner villain. We have different names for it, and different labels for it, but it's that voice inside your head that fills you with self-doubt and with self-hatred and tells you that you are not good enough. And that's what I mean with the inner bully. So for me, I think the healing comes from actually acknowledging that I have that inner bully and silencing that inner bully, and then living my life from the inside out.
That makes absolute sense, because I think, just thinking back to times when I was bullied, I think at school there's always this the big kid in the class at school that bullies you, and you look back and you think, well, why didn't I say something? Well, there was a reason for that, because you obviously didn't feel as if you had the strength to do that. You didn't think it was too scary. And I suppose it's the same with workplaces, that you don't say something because there's other things at play, isn't it? You need your
Yeah.
job, you don't want a challenge, and so it's about putting yourself in that place where you have the resources to actually do the right thing for yourself. It's not necessarily about fighting back, is it?
Absolutely. And it's having that positive self-regard,
Hmm.
because I talk in my book, I talk about healthy narcissism. And I try and normalize the conversation around narcissism, because actually we're all narcissists, because all narcissism is the desire to feel special. And we all have that desire to feel special to a lesser or greater extent. Now, when it becomes a problem is when you have too little narcissism or too much narcissism. So it's a case of healthy narcissism is present in all of the leaders that we see. You know, the best, the highest performers in the world. They're confident, they have self-compassion, they have respect for others, you know, they're resilient, you know. So all those positive traits are associated because you put yourself out there and you have that self-compassion, that kindness to yourself. And and so I think it's important that we recognize that we until we have that healthy relationship with ourselves, we cannot have healthy relationships and healthy boundaries in our relationships with others.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, one of the reasons why I know Marilise is that we are both practitioners for liberating leadership, which is a toolkit of all sorts of things that we can use with our clients. One thing particularly with regards to what you've just described there is the OK Corral. Uh,
Yes.
so I think it'd be a good idea for you to describe what that is, because
Yeah.
I think with what you've just said, the OK Corral is something that can be really powerful in to use in that scenario.
Oh, absolutely. So, so ROAR, just to come back to ROAR. So
Mm-hmm.
ROAR is a four-step process for having a difficult conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So it stands for recognize, observe, assert, and redirect.
Mm-hmm.
So always when I say to people, is there a difficult conversation with someone else that you are avoiding? Or the difficult conversation with yourself. So ROAR applies, I have inner ROAR and outer ROAR. So it's a process for both the conversation with yourself and with others. One of the very first steps you have to take is to get into that mindset before you have the conversation of, I'm okay and you're okay. So when you're interacting with someone else, you have to have positive regard for yourself first and foremost, but also have positive regard for the other person. So that mindset is absolutely critical because you want to go into that conversation wanting to know more about the other person's perspective, you know, wanting to understand where they are coming from. I often say, you know, be curious, not furious. So you want to have a learning conversation, and you therefore must have positive regard for yourself. So I'm okay, and you must have positive regard for the other person. So you're okay. So you're going into that conversation with a healthy mindset and naturally with the ability to create a great outcome from that conversation.
Yeah, I thought that was a brilliant way of summing up how you can actually approach it and what you need to think about with regards
Yeah.
to if you go into that with regards to proving someone that it's that, well, I'm okay but you're not, straight
Yes.
away that's not going to help the situation. It's just if you just get to that, it's very similar to where we get to the position where we need to be adult to adult
Yes.
transactional analysis,
Spot
where
on.
and keep it adult to adult. As soon as you try to go into that sort of position of parenting or dropping into the childlike position, then it's not likely to be very helpful. Great
Yes.
stuff. So tell us a bit more about the raw process and how that sort of came about.
I think, you know, I always say this has been my gift. I think, you know, I was born and Raw was always going to be my gift one day, and it was going to be gifted to me through my life experience. And I think that's how it sort of worked. I mean, people ask me, where does Raw come from? I'm like, I actually have no idea, other than the fact that I grew up in South Africa. The Lion King is my favorite movie. I am a Leo star sign. So yeah, so I just knew when I decided to write the book, I just knew the title was going to be Roar. At the time, I didn't know the four-step process. I haven't created that. So it was very much, I believe, a gift. But it stemmed from my experience. So my life experience and the correlation of the inner bully is very much the fact that, yes, I experienced workplace bullying, but I also experienced sexual abuse as a child. And I have since made that sort of connection that abuse is abuse, full stop. Because not only was I abused by other people, I also abused myself, because I had an eating disorder for 15 years, and that inner bully, that self-hatred kept telling me that I'm not enough, not good enough, not thin enough, not pretty enough, not fill in the blank enough. So all those experiences kind of culminated in this passion I have to help, to give victims a voice, to help people step out of that victim mentality into that victor mentality, and to really recognize that, if we don't forgive, if we don't, and forgiving ourselves first and foremost, if we don't let go, if we don't move on, we're always going to live in that victim story, and then the abusers are going to win. And so we have to step into our power. So central to the Roar Blueprint is living on purpose, stepping into your power. So winning your inner game and winning your outer game. So I always say, turn your thoughts and your feelings and your words and your actions into your 4 superpowers. And then finally, have the courage to speak your truth, your authentic truth. And that's the sort of the heart of the blueprint is the Roar process, which is about having those difficult conversations, or let's rather reposition them as courageous conversations. So having courageous conversations.
Yeah. That's really interesting, and there's lots of things going through in my mind that I don't want to go too much down on a tangent. But with regards to the our personality and behavioural styles, um, probably some people are watching this thinking, yeah, but that's just the way I am. It might be just misinterpreted when it comes to bullying. So for those that aren't aware of the sort of 4 colour models, there's a 4 colour model, I should say. There is the red, fiery red behavioural style, which is very much about getting things done, very task focused. Then you get the yellow, which is very extroverted but more people focused. The green, which is introverted but people focused. And then the blue, which is very much about task focused but very much introverted.
Yes.
So I wonder how those 4 sort of show up when it comes to bullying. Is that something that you've sort of looked into?
I don't want to necessarily label it like that, because I think it's being a good person at heart. And why do people actually mistreat other people? It's because deep inside they are not happy with themselves. Deep inside they have insecurities. They might not necessarily recognize or express or acknowledge it to the outside world, but we know that anybody who treats anybody else badly, it's because deep down inside yourself you don't like yourself very much. And I think if you have been, or if you are a target on the receiving side of bad behavior, always remember that person is treating you badly because they are projecting onto you the way that they are feeling deep down inside. Now, I don't think it matters what color you are. It might be more prominent in a red than a green, for example. And it might be that you have people who are highly read, people who get to the top of organizations, CEOs. There is sort of lots of press and research around CEOs being psychopaths. And so there must be a correlation, but I think we should be careful not to kind of broad brush and generalize, because I think at the end of the day, it's about being a good person at heart. And recognizing that if you treat other people, I kind of always want to say like shit, it's because you feel like shit inside. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I think it's really interesting that it's very much about, when we're talking about bullying, we talk about somebody else, but actually what you're talking about a lot here is actually it starts with you. It's how you think about yourself. And if you become a bully, then that's about how you feel about yourself, and that's because you don't you don't have a good relationship with yourself, and I think that's fascinating. I've never thought of it like that, and I think if you're watching this, it'd be great to hear. And if you're not live but you've picked this up on replay, then it'd be great to get your comments about that, and not necessarily about the bullies that you've experienced, but what about it yourself? Are you inadvertently becoming a bully because there's something about yourself that you don't like, and you need to address it? So that's really a fascinating way of looking at it, and I think that's a completely different perspective than I thought of before we started talking. So look, there's lots of things in the book, and there's obviously strategies in the book. Isn't there particularly things in the book that you sort of came out? I've just written a book myself, and there was things that I didn't think about writing before, but as I wrote the book, it actually became more and more focused on a certain element. Was there something about the book that came out that wasn't there before?
This was a very cathartic experience. So I think,
Mm,
this was a year of personal therapy. I kind of threw my everything, my whole soul into writing this book, but it was a very healing experience at the same time. When I set out to write the book, it was all about the bully, the actual bully,
mm,
right? And as I progressed through the months and writing the chapters, I realized that I had this inner bully, and I started connecting the dots. And I think so for me, it was very much the theme of this. And you've just kind of, beautifully explained the inner bully piece and the, inner game piece. There
mm.
probably wasn't as much of a focus on that when I set out to write the book. And as I learned and as I discovered and as I took more and more personal responsibility for the role that I played in the dynamics of how the relationship played out, I recognized that there was this inner outer dynamic, but it has to start from the inside out. Um, Absolutely, and I think for me the other interesting part was the kind of the deep research that I did. So I ended up. I wasn't planning to do research, and then I had a conversation with someone one day, and he said, "Oh, this book would be so much more powerful if you can attach some actual research to it." So I actually ended up doing a survey. I had over 200 people complete the survey, and was able to draw some strong themes, particularly from a workplace bullying context, because I talk about the toxic trio. So I talk about the bully, the victim or the targets, and the organizational culture. So the three components, and it's really that a bully cannot bully if it's not um, facilitated by the culture of the organization. So if the culture is actually helping that bully, um, then that's a real big problem, because it's the responsibility of leaders to actually create safe and inclusive environments for people to thrive. So it was really interesting, because the statistics that came out in particular to HR and the role of HR was quite shocking. So I think for me that piece of research just put some rigor to it and some real statistics and evidence around how this problem is playing out, in particular in the workplace.
So when you say workplace culture, then really, obviously, that starts at the top, doesn't it? It's about what goes on in the boardroom, how that pans out, and obviously that can trickle down. If there's not a good culture at the top, then that's going to trickle down
Yeah.
into all the departments and whatever, especially in big organisations. So how do you sort of get into the boardroom with regards to this, and start introducing better ways to make sure that bullying doesn't become part of the culture?
So I think for me it links back to speak up culture, and it links back to what is what are our employees telling us about their willingness to speak up, and any organization that care about employee engagement will do their annual surveys, and they will take that number very, very seriously. And I always say, it's the moral and legal obligation of leaders and HR to create safe and inclusive spaces where people are not afraid to speak up. What is, and it's not just the numbers. It's like, because you can notice toxic and pockets of toxicity by the way people are being coerced, and people are afraid to speak up because of retaliation, potentially because they might be afraid of retaliation, backlash, all that sort of thing. So it's really about being aware of what's going on in the organization, and then the leaders, as you say, taking this stuff seriously, and really taking and prioritizing psychological safety. So I mean, we talk a lot about physical safety, and embedding safety in cultures is so important, but the psychological safety piece is as important. So it's really encouraging to see these days how much the conversation around mental health in the workplace is being normalized, and I think COVID has helped to facilitate that and to sort of propel that conversation forwards. But I do think this is now, it has to be a top priority on every board's agenda.
Well, I mean, we know that most people don't leave their job; they leave their boss. In
Yeah.
most instances, I think it's about 70% of people that leave their work, their job is it's to do with who's managing them, as opposed to the job that they're doing. So this is really important work, isn't it? Because not only is it causing problems for individuals, it's actually become it must be very costly as well. Is there any sort of figures on how much bullying costs at the workplace?
I mean, there is. I
Mm.
won't be able to give you numbers right now, but there
Mm.
is. I mean, it is. I mean, the question I often ask is, how much is it costing you to tolerate the brilliant jerk? Because it might be someone that's bringing in lots and lots and lots of money for the company, but what is it
Mm.
actually costing you in morale, in productivity, in particular? I think there are some huge invisible numbers there. So I think absolutely, and I have seen some research in that space, but it's absolutely morale and productivity. If we could put a cost on that, I
Yeah.
think it would easily outnumber the millions that the brilliant jerk bring in for the company.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of bravery, doesn't it? Not only in that calling that person out that's actually behaving in that way, but also if you're running a business and you've got someone that brings in a lot of revenue, it takes a lot of bravery to tackle it and actually eliminate it, because there's not only going to be a sort of backlash, there's also going to be a financial um, price to pay, and sometimes that's
Hey,
a barrier, isn't it? I mean, we can go on forever. All these barriers that stop these things can stop things being addressed. But a financial one is quite a powerful one, isn't it?
it is, but I think it's recognizing that there's the short-term financial gain, but what is
Mm.
the long-term impact? So I think it's encouraging business owners and CEOs to really look at, we might have this very, very short-term view, because companies, let's face it, have typically got very, very short-term views. But what is the longer term implications here? Because what is a very, very prominent trait of real toxic bullies is that they have short term relationships. They don't have relationships for very long. So they're kind of treating people like objects. So they kind of cycle people in and out at a ridiculous pace, right? So it's about how do we recognize all those symptoms, employee turnover, all those sorts of things, and start putting some numbers to it. And how expensive is it to get a new person in every time? Every time the body decides, oh, I can't work with this person anymore, bring me a new person. If that's a senior exec, the cost of that and NDA and redundancy and all that sort of stuff is significant, right? So, but nobody, as you say, gets swept under the carpet. Nobody talks about that.
And that's why culture is so important, isn't it? Sadly, Marilise, our time is running out. So before I let you go, could you just tell us where people can find you, and also where they can buy your book, most importantly?
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me today, and for this fantastic show. I'm so impressed with everything. It's great the way that you've set it up and everything. So it's so much fun, a good experience for me. Yeah, so I'm at Marilise, at marilise-de-villiers.com. So that's my website. I'm on all main socials, but LinkedIn is probably my main platform that I use. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And yeah, my book is on Amazon. So you can just type in Roar, Marilise de Villiers Basson, and it should come up.
I love the graphics, and I like the way you got a square book.
Yeah.
So you don't see many square books
Yeah,
these days. Yeah,
I knew. The first thing I knew is I wanted my cousin to design my graphics, and I wanted to have a square book. So
yeah,
I knew that
fabulous.
before I knew anything else.
Yes, that's the creator coming out in you. That is good stuff. Thank you ever so much for your time today, and hopefully we'll catch up again very soon.
Thank you, Mark. Take care. Have a great day.
And you. Great stuff. Well, check out Marilise, the work she's done. It's great. We all know that, the knock-on effects of bullying at work is not great, and so we need to do everything we can to eliminate it. And remembering that we have a role to play, even if we think that we're the one that's being bullied. So, if you're going back to the motivators piece, if you're interested in finding out what motivates you, if you go to the reluctantleader.academy website and look at the courses, you'll find there is one called How to Stay Energized at Work. And if you complete that course, you will find out what motivates you. You'll have a 5-step process to follow where you can actually make sure that you are getting those motivators fulfilled in your role. And if you are a business owner, make sure that you are the most motivated person in that business is essential. So thank you for joining us today. I hope you found the content useful, and hopefully will join us again on the next episode of the Reluctant Leader Academy's The Get Savvy Show, I should say, very soon. Bye for now.